their principal sponsors, MUBI and BFI. This session will explore the creative and practical steps involved in shaping a rep programme from idea to the big screen and everything in between. We'll look into examples such as Cinema Rediscovered's 1971, the year Hollywood went independent strand, and Home's wonderful Celebrating Women in Global Cinema. We'll get insights into the steps that help make this kind of programming happen and, importantly, discuss how to engage audiences and create impact. So here I am, I'm chairing, and we're going to actually cut to someone to have a little introduction at the moment. Bear with me 1 second. We're going to have Rachel Hayward joining us, Mark Cosgrove joining us, Julie Pearce, and of course, Jack Bell. We're going to have a Q&A at the end, so feel free to ask questions all the way through on the chat, and they'll be fed to me and I'll be answering them. Also, please note that there are live captions today too. Do feel free to click on the link in the chat to access that. We'll be sharing the recording afterwards, and we're live as well. So firstly, I wanted to cut to our PC CEO, Mark Hartsberger-Taylor, for a little intro. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Anna. Lovely to see you again. And it's great that this webinar is taking place, as you say, where so many cinemas around the world are open again. It's lovely to see you. I just want to extend a warm welcome on behalf of Park Circus. A big thank you to our illustrious panelists who are here. I think looking forward to a very nice conversation. When we set this up a few months ago, it was very, we very much wanted this to become a regular thing. So going forward after the pandemic, so it's exciting now to be under that in that new normality, and it's very exciting to be partnering with such a prestigious festival as Cinema Rediscovered. So congratulations to them. Obviously, it's an incredible challenge to be opening and managing a festival under these circumstances. So well done, and we're happy to support. So yeah, that's all for me. I just wanted to say hello and pass over, as I say, to our very distinguished panel, and to all the exhibitors and partners out there. Well done, congratulations, and good luck going forward. It's been a bumpy ride. Let's hope that it's let's hope that it's kind of greener pastures out there. And please remember that we're here to support you in whatever. So good luck to us all, and enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, it does feel like really special and exciting time. So fingers crossed for the way forward. So we're going to start today once more with a little video to get us all in the mood for cinema. So this is a fantastic trailer. It's hot off the press. It's to mark the launch of 1971, the year Hollywood went independent, which is a brand new season of films being launched by Park Circus and Cinema Rediscovered at this very special festival, which is now underway, as I mentioned. All the films in this season are available for cinemas nationwide to book from August onwards to help inspire their audiences back to the big screen. So there'll be more from Jack and Mark on this later. Meantime, let's have a look at the trailer.
You wouldn't believe how this country's changed.
I'll see you in a year or two if I don't get shot.
If a person has no respect for himself, how can he expect love in return?
Well, that certainly whetted my appetite. I have some fantastic guests today, as I mentioned, and I would like to give them a warm welcome. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them first. So Julie Pearce, Head of Distribution at the BFI. Julie has held various positions in the programming team at BFI and has been responsible for organising major retrospectives such as Ingmar Bergman, Hitchcock and Pasolini. Now BFI Head of Distribution and Programming Operations, she is responsible for recent releases such as Bait, Mogul Mowgli, County Lines, After Love, all brilliant films, and re-releases such as Nashville and Notorious. She's also programmed BFI IMAX for 5 years and currently programs the archive strand of the BFI London Film Festival. That's a lot of stuff. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. Moving on to my next guest, which is Rachel Hayward, who's Head of Film at Home. Rachel has over 16 years experience in film exhibition, festival programming and film education. Rachel has led the artistic team for Viva Spanish and Latin American Film Festival since 2009, and she's a co-creator of Home's Not Just Bollywood film programme. With Andy Willis, she created the wide-reaching 2019 programme Celebrating Women in Global Cinema, a year-long programme of films and events highlighting and celebrating women in film from across the world, something we were involved with at Girls on Film podcast as well. In addition to her role at Home, she has lectured on a range of film and cultural topics and is one of the trustees of the Alliance Française de Manchester. Hello, Rachel.
Hello.
Welcome. And Mark Cosgrove, Cinema Rediscovered from Watershed. Let's give you a little intro to him. Mark has worked in and been a champion of independent cinema exhibition for over 30 years. He has created seasons and touring programmes ranging from new Portuguese cinema to retrospectives of French filmmaker Claire Denis, Austrian director Ulrich Seidel, Bristol-born J. Lee Thompson and composer Bernard Herrmann. He's the cinema curator at Watershed in Bristol, and it's one of the UK's leading independent cinemas, of course. He's been on juries at Cannes, at Venice and Berlin film festivals. And in 2010, he received the Entrepreneur of the Year from Europa Cinemas Award. He recently co-founded Cinema Rediscovered Festival. Hi, Mark.
Hiya.
Welcome. And finally, you've met him before. We are delighted to welcome once more Jack Bell, the Director of Theatrical Sales at Park Circus. Hi, Jack.
Hello. I better get working on my biography, I guess, compared to all
that
those
was pretty
but...
short, wasn't it? Would you like to
Yeah.
add to that? Some, awards you've won? Anything
No
you want to
awards
shout
yet,
about?
so maybe webinar of the year at some point. We'll see how it goes.
I think that's definitely in the offing here. So today's session is about exploring the creative and practical steps involved in shaping a repertory programme, from the idea to the big screen and everything in between. We want you to leave today with a few practical steps as to how you might bring what I'm sure are many programming ideas out there around rep film to fruition. So let's start with Rachel. Perhaps we can start with Home and your fantastic 2019 year-long programme, Celebrating Women in Global Cinema. Can you tell us a little bit more about the season and how it came to fruition, Rachel?
Absolutely. Thanks, Anna, for that introduction. It's great to be here this morning. Celebrating Women in Global Cinema is a home project, as we've mentioned in the bio, which was developed by me and Andy Willis. And Andy is Home's Senior Visiting Curator. We delivered the programme throughout 2019 and into early 2020, because although we devised it as a year-long programme, we just had so much amazing content that we wanted to show that we broke our own rules and put it into January 2020 as well. The season continues and expanded Home's long-standing commitment to diversity in terms of programme delivery, and it also offered diversity in terms of different voices and people who were contributing to the programme as well. The on-screen work that we presented was from self-identifying women filmmakers, and that included directors, writers, producers, and as well as some key acting figures. We also presented a series of events that foregrounded women in a number of other film-related roles, which is Anna's just touched on as well. So Anna joined us for a critic sessions, a number of critic sessions for the Girls on Film podcast. So that kind of wraparound side of things was really important to the wider elements of the programme as well. And the year-long thematic, such as well as Celebrating Women, was a really new way of approaching our signature seasons. They'd usually been more like a weekend, 6 or 8 films, or perhaps 1 to 3 months long. That was normally our longest duration. And all the screen-based creative staff at Home really took to this new approach to the project and developed it in their own areas of work, which I'll touch on a little bit more as well. The project followed on from other creative partnerships with Andy, and his major projects at Home that we'd worked on included Rep Seasons, Crime Hong Kong Style, and States of Danger and Deceit, and also, crucially, Visible Secrets, Hong Kong's Women Filmmakers, which was back in 2010. And that latter season was very much a thematic springboard for our Celebrating Women in Global Cinema project. Early on in the planning, as I mentioned, Andy and I had decided on the project focusing on women and taking up a really vast amount of the programme. And that became very clear early on that we couldn't deliver this in any of those normal formats that we had for seasons. It was vast in scope. We had so much that we wanted to do. So it was very clear early on that this was a year-long project. So we went straight in on there and committed wholeheartedly. So we approached Celebrating Women as an umbrella project with audience-facing branding that would be used throughout the season. And under this curatorial umbrella, Andy and I programmed a range of small, medium and large-scale discrete seasons. And the full info is still online. We've got a programme archive on the home website. And the rep work formed a really important part of the work that we did around representation and diversity in the exhibition programme. So a handful, this is by no means all of the highlights, but a handful of the season's foregrounding archive work included retrospectives with work from directors such as Angie Chen, Lena Wertmuller, Ngozi Onwurah, archive TV work, which included a focus on writer Debbie Horsfield, and also incorporated a screening and event project from a PhD student whom we worked with on a placement with our film programme producer, Jen Hall. We curated thematic seasons such as Women Organise, which focused on women's involvement in the trade union movement. And on-screen representation was further explored in the original Ass Kickers, which wins the award for our favourite season title ever. And that considered women's place in Hong Kong action-based cinema. In Her View was a series of archive documentaries from women documentarians. We also took over our regular monthly classics. Many of those films came from Park Circus, not all, but many of them. We had a number of rep screenings in our all-women directors season of Not Just Bollywood for 2019, and that was its largest season to date. So the list of programmes goes on and on. It's quite vast. But to move away from the programming side of things and to talk more in terms of audience development, as part of that campaign, our marketing team used the Celebrating Women in Global Cinema branding in support of relevant new releases as well. And that was kind of done in parallel to the work that Andy and I were driving in terms of curated seasons. And it very much complemented the programme, but that branding then went on to new release programming as well, which I'm not going to talk so much about today. The season marketing campaign that the team did was vast and it evolved over the year. The nature of this umbrella season and this umbrella approach to rep gave the marketing and comms team room to experiment and room to really explore what rep screening can mean to audiences and to really delve a little deeper into contemporary relevance for rep screening. And that was something that was really successful. We did stick to our commitment to only have the branded season for the designated time period, although, as I did mention early on, it slipped to 13 months. And those 13 months saw us deliver such a packed programme. And because of that, we've got so many projects that, and also because the work with Celebrating Women just doesn't end just because the branded project has ended. We have a number of things that we're going to be delivering in the coming year and the coming years. It's a very long-term plan, even though the audience-facing branding of logo, of sting, of marketing taglines has gone now.
Well, Rachel, you've achieved so much with the team there. That's really, really impressive. Congratulations. I'm sure a lot of people watching would love some tips from the top here, you know, kind of practical ideas and creative steps of how you brought this idea to the screen. Is there anything you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. In thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, I've really been considering what made Celebrating Women a success, because it was such a vast project and we put so much into it and we got so enthusiastic that we probably had too much work to deliver, but that is such a brilliant problem to have. So in terms of what I think could be taken away and what made a success, the first thing I would say would be the overarching thing is the dedication to the vision of the season, and the fact that Andy and I, and also the others in the film team, including Jason Wood and other members of staff at home, we all had confidence in the curatorial offer. So that was both in terms of what the season could offer audiences, but also what being part of the season could offer distributors or festivals who were providing the films to us, and that amplification of the films and their impact on audiences. So in practical terms, that meant for us that commitment and confidence, that meant that we were always framing season opportunities as part of celebrating women. So in short, if we were given an opportunity to do something, we would always think, well, yes, we want to do this. It sounds like a great idea, but it has to be a Celebrating Women project if it's to happen in 2019. So a perfect example of that one is the BFI musical celebration, which was just at the end of our year of the project in 2019. And we wanted to include some well-known archive titles because we know that they do really well in terms of rep. People do enjoy seeing things they're familiar with. But we also obviously want to show lesser seen films as well, as is part of our usual curatorial approach. And so to bring this round into a Celebrating Women angle, the home curated offer focused on the work of twice Oscar-nominated writer Betty Comden, and that enabled us to screen films such as Singing in the Rain and On the Town, but also to bring other titles in. But rather than foreground the stars, as would normally be the case for those films, we very much put Betty Comden front and centre and used the work to highlight her sizable contribution to the Hollywood musical. And I think that was an important way of reframing for audiences. And I think it's important to see how we can use rep films and archive programming to put a different story forward using some of the same familiar titles. Our next marker for success, if you like, was internal buy-in at home at an organisational level. So this is definitely something that we wouldn't have been able to achieve what we did if we hadn't have had this. So it's, whilst Andy and I were the drivers for the programme, is an awful lot of people behind it. So that included our talent development team, who did a range of events, and also our visual arts curators who did a special edition of our Artist Film Weekender, which itself included a number of archive titles and wraparound events as well. That idea of buy-in is also central in terms of our partnerships. So alongside Girls on Film, we worked with a whole range of people with whom we had synergy in terms of their work. And I'm not going to remember everyone, but we worked with Bird's Eye View, Girls on Film, the Barbican, the ICO, and many other people who were doing similar work and who are continuing to do similar work. And those partnerships were really important. But equally, we developed new partnerships and also shaped some of our existing partnerships to bring people on board with Celebrating Women. And I'm very pleased to say that absolutely everybody was very, very happy to do so. Our next thing that I'm very proud of is the new voices and new people who are contributing to the programme. I've already mentioned our PhD student. She did a brilliant PhD student who did a placement with us. She's not our particular student. She did an amazing event of Granada TV archive work, which is again on our, details of which are on our website. And we also worked with a number of people who either scaled up their curatorial events and their curatorial practice, or who did something for the very first time. And then as part of the other side of the legacy, we had a number of peripheral successes where we met people through the open calls or through events, and they went on to work with the organisation in some way. So perhaps our most notable one was a designer who produced some marketing materials and tote bags for us, and it was their first professional experience for an organisation, and that came out of one of our events. So lots of successes out of a really broad programme.
Oh, well, well done again. It sounds like such a collaborative effort for you, your team, and the audience as well. So that there's a lot to take away from that. Thank you, Rachel. Now, I'd like to bring Julie Pearce from the BFI into the conversation now. Now, clearly the BFI have a huge remit, not least when it comes to the role of classic film in the UK. So, Julie, can you tell us a little bit more about the BFI's own ways of bringing idea to screen and how you work with other cinemas and festivals across the UK to support them in that process?
Sure. I thought it might be worth touching on our Ingmar Bergman retrospective that took place January to March 2018. And part of my job really is always to keep an eye out for moments, for restorations, for anniversaries, just little pegs to hang programming on that excites the press. So in around 2015, I started talking to the Swedish Film Institute, and they luckily confirmed they were planning to remaster all of Bergman's films for the centenary. So very exciting. But then internally, we had a lot of angst about how we could go, how we could present over 60 films. It's a beast of a project. And the other important thing for us, when you're putting so much work into a project like that, how can you involve cinemas UK-wide in the project? One of the things we were thinking about was how Bergman had kind of set the template for a kind of European film aesthetic that really changed the medium forever. And, he was pretty single vision and interior, challenging, male, but also he was kind of honest, sensitive, generous, playful. And we felt that this season we need to challenge current perspectives on Bergman. So to organise such a beast of a season, we tried to kind of boil it down into, several things. One of the things is, I think when you present something that big, you need to make it into bite-sized sections. Another interesting thing to do is not to run it chronologically. Otherwise, you have perhaps a bit of an unbalanced programme. You'd have a particular kind of film at the beginning, perhaps stronger work in the middle, and then it maybe tails off towards the end. I'm just thinking about Otto Preminger, for example. By the time you get to the end, it's like, oh my God, do we really want to show these films? Anyway, we decided to really mix it up with Bergman. We were really interested on the female experience as well. He unusually made a large number of films focused on female protagonists, so that would be one of the sections. With the big retrospectives as well, we always try and pull out 2 or 3 key releases, and we landed on Persona, The Magic Flute, and The Touch. And then that ensures you get national reviews for those films, and then your retrospective can piggyback on those releases. So that was key for us. We knew we needed some key guests as well in terms of talent. So luckily we rustled up Liv Ullmann, Richard Ayoade, and Andrei Zhigantsev, who luckily had Loveless. I don't know if you remember, Loveless was coming out around that time, and it was based on Bergman's Scenes from a Marriage. So we kind of sucked all of them into the retrospective as well. And we also approached key UK academics and Swedish academics as well to cover off that area. Again, one of the key things when you're doing a large retrospective is the marketing, and just kind of reinvigorating marketing materials and targeting younger people. So we actually engaged 3 younger people just to act as advisors and to advise us on a new look for Bergman. And the marketing centered on Persona, but it looked very different. We produced new posters, trailers, and assets. Once we got all of that in place, you then add the bells and whistles into your season. So we added in study days. We had a small Fanny and Alexander exhibition. We had education courses. We pulled in our regular strands. So we do a philosophical screen strand, for example, where we looked at Bergman's Cinema of Existence. And we also asked Campbell Addy, the photographer, to put together a small film in celebration of Bergman. The other key thing with these big retrospectives is partners, really, really key, because they help you carry the load. Hopefully, there's not a lot of money about, I have to say, but they do really help with marketing and press. So we had Swedish Film Institute, the Bergman Foundation, Birkbeck, the Old Vic as well came in, and they had an adaptation of Fanny and Alexander playing at the same time. And we worked with them on looking at Bergman sort of beyond the silver screen. So looking at his work across different mediums, you know, theatre, television, as well as film and writing. And one of the key things for us with this retrospective were a lot of the films had actually been out of commission for quite a few years, because most of the catalogue had been bought by Metro Tartan, who then went down the pan, and the catalogue passed to a company called Palisade, and they're based in the US. And really the films were mothballed. They were trapped in a warehouse because perhaps the bills weren't being paid, and the films just weren't available. So we kind of decided to speculate to accumulate, and we made 8 new DCPs, which we then made available around the UK, which went down very well, I'm pleased to say. And really the whole Bergman thing has just rolled on. After that, we then acquired, there were quite a few new documentaries around at the time. We acquired a Bergman, A Year in a Life. That was one of them. And the good news is, I think because of the great work we did on the retrospective, and thanks to everyone around the UK who made it a huge success as well, we have now acquired the Bergman catalogue. You know, Tartan's rights, Palisade's rights ran out, and we've nipped in there. So over the next few years, we'll be rolling out some of the kind of key titles, re-releasing maybe things like Cries and Whispers, Wild Strawberries, for example. And then January and February time, we're going to do a similar thing with Truffaut, using the Bergman model, and again, making films available around the UK. So that's just an example of a kind of big, meaty retrospective and how you try and break it down and make it more accessible.
That's so interesting. Thank you, Julie. As you say, a beast of a season with so many different elements, and I love that it's still carrying on and still giving. Would the other panelists like to join in at all at this point, in terms of working with the BFI and how they can be helpful? Anyone got anything to add to that?
Well, I mean, I think that although, as Julie says, the resources are limited, the BFI clearly have, you know, good resources and access to the international reach and also the archive itself. So, I mean, all that great work that's done on a season like Bergman, it then makes that available in a kind of meaningful way, I think, and it's that sort of wider sort of meaningful way that I think is really good for exhibitors to be able to sort of tap into, rather than you know, here's a reissue of something that you might be interested in. It's more, it's got a coherence around it, but also the BFI do have the resources to be able to you know, up the ante in terms of what's on offer.
Yeah, Mark, Rachel, I mean, I always try and check in with the key venues as well, just to get your opinion on what we should be re-releasing or making available. So, you know, I really like that you feed into that. Thank you.
Great, so communication is key. Brilliant. Now, for the next 10 minutes, I want to chat to Mark and Jack about a very current example of how an idea can be brought to the big screen. So Mark and Jack, can you tell us a little bit more about how this idea of the 1971, the year Hollywood went independent, came to fruition between Cinema Rediscovered and Park Circus? Perhaps, Mark, we could start with hearing something about the festival itself. Yeah. And then after that, Jack, perhaps you can help us with understanding how Park Circus can help any exhibitors watching this, how to bring rep film into their programme. So Mark, take it away.
Yeah, well, it was interesting, you know, hearing Rachel and Julie, the scale, because the 1971, the year Hollywood went independent season is way smaller, because, you know, we're dealing with the realities, I'm dealing with the realities of the sort of COVID situation, and actually this could have been a much bigger season, but what COVID has done, and actually I think it's probably been to the benefit of the season, is it's actually focused on what the titles are and why, and I'll maybe come on to that later, but both things, this season and Cinema Rediscovered, go back to Il Cinema Ritrovato Festival in Bologna. You know, for people, and I'm sure most people do know it, but if you've managed to be there, you'll see cinema, the history of cinema come alive again for audiences. And Pam Hutchinson that gave the lecture yesterday at Cinema Rediscovered said that, you know, there isn't really a thing called an old film. It becomes young again. It's a young film when it's put in front of an audience, and you see that in Bologna. And so that was the inspiration for the festival itself. You know, seeing older films restored, represented as young films, audiences engaging with them, plus also, you know, getting audiences in Bristol at Watershed for repertory film. But also the season specifically, I saw the restoration of Easy Rider in the Piazza Maggiore in Bologna, which was just an extraordinary experience to see that film. But you know this was about 3 years ago, I think, 2 or 3 years ago. And what I was struck by, you know, and I know the film pretty well, but what I was struck by was how kind of aesthetically, formally, it was really experimental. And that just kind of really stayed with me. And then as time went on, I started sort of reading a bit more about that period. I was actually influenced by Scorsese's article in the magazine, where he talked about, it was actually about Fellini, but he talked about the current situation with streaming and relationship with streamers in making films. And I was kind of, you know, connecting Scorsese coming out of that period in Hollywood in the 70s, the impact of Easy Riders. I was also teaching students where I was talking about the growth of the franchise and the summer blockbuster, so Star Wars, Jaws. And then I went back to Peter Biskin's Easy Riders, Raging Bulls. And, you know, that's when the kind of research started going into this idea. And of course, as Julie said, there's always that hook of an anniversary. So 50 years since 71. I looked at what was released and it was like, oh my God, these are some fantastic films that were made by the studios, you know, 5 Easy Pieces. I mean, Two Lane Blacktop has to be the most defiantly independent film ever made by a studio. And because of, I actually remember having a coffee with Jack in Bologna, probably after or before the Easy Rider screening, and just talking about reissues and restorations and stuff. And really from that, and obviously knowing Park Circus and Jack through the ongoing work that we do, I sent Jack a list of films from 71 and said, are these available? And you know, that's then resulted in 1971, the year Hollywood went independent, with the 5 films, and now, you know, going on tour as well. So I don't know, Jack, if you want to pick it up from there.
Yeah, it's been really interesting listening to everyone so far as well. So thanks again. I mean, to be honest, as Mark says, sometimes it can be as simple as having a conversation. I think Park Circus is really fortunate that we have such a vast catalogue of titles across many different libraries that presents a great kind of window into repertory. You know, certainly is quite accessible in that sense. But even going back to what Julie was saying there about being able to have that contact with, in that case, the Swedish Film Institute, or having that knowledge about where the rights may lie for a film as well, it can be quite complicated, of course. You know, where can you track those films down? I think it's interesting for, you know, the different way you could look at repertory, because there are quite a lot of standalone re-releases of classics now by a number of different studios. Even home entertainment distributors might do that in order to create some publicity for a film they'll be releasing on Blu-ray. But probably one of the most interesting ways to start looking at repertory are through these sorts of projects that Mark, Julie, and Rachel have discussed here, where, okay, there might be a re-release that frames around it, but how can you look at it in a broader scale and not just, you know, kind of go out of the release calendar model and just almost say to yourself, well, you know, okay, anniversaries can be a good hook into something, but you can start repertory without any deadline attached to it. You know, Mark Scott's Cinema Rediscovered that is every year. But if you really want to do a season that, for example, isn't anniversary specific, but just is about new Hollywood or when Hollywood made independent style films, you could start that whenever you want and just take as much time as you need in order to research the rights and so on. So I think, you know, going back to the 1971 season with Mark and Cinema Rediscovered, you know, what was great for us is that that conversation started really far in advance. You know, in many cases, it can be very quick from Park Circus's point of view to confirm whether rights are available or not. nothing needs to be confirmed with us when you check that. You know, we don't expect to then have a commitment for you to book that film that day when you ask to check rights. You know, something that we do as part of our, you know, our service, effectively confirm whether rights are available. If you come back to us in 2 years' time, as long as we still have the rights, that's absolutely fine. And if anything, you know, what was really good, and that was part of the process with Mark as well, was identifying what titles were available, not just from a rights point of view, but also in format availability. So, you know, DCPs, of course, is the kind of best piece of news for titles you want to track down. Obviously, as Julie said there, that was key to unlocking a lot more of the Bergman films even, which can be, you know, really exciting for exhibitors. It just makes it a lot easier to have that format available. Equally, 35mm, we have lots of those available too. And I know that the 1971 season has a couple of titles that will be playing in that format that we're making available. But, you know, if you're looking at a season yourself and you are interested in framing around, you know, how Easy Rider unlocked the idea of this season for Mark, that was presented as a brand new 4K restoration in Bologna. But if there's a film that you know, are really passionate about, you feel you would like to introduce into a repertory program, it could well be that a DCP could get created for that film. I mean, we're having a lot more conversations with the studios recently who have understandably had to pause a lot of their catalogue restoration and preservation work due to COVID. That's now picking up steam again. But, you know, they have, a lot of them have plans and schedules for constantly preserving their libraries. More often than not, that can be linked to their home entertainment divisions, equally their streaming platforms now, talking about the Hollywood studios specifically here. But let's say Easy Rider wasn't available in DCP, you know, we could be talking to the studio to say, look, there is interest in this film from Cinema Rediscovered. Through that, there could be the potential for, let's say, up to 20 theatres in the UK to then screen that film. It might be that there's a really problematic story to that film and the materials that existed for it. In order to create a DCP, sometimes there can be director approvals that, you know, really increase the cost of these things. But also, you know, it could quickly turn around and say, okay, great, we'll put that title up the queue, and that we can make that title available in DCP even in, say, 6 months' time. So I think really one of the key things, and it's clearly apparent in all the seasons that have been discussed here, which are so impressive, you know, time was so important. And I think obviously all of your organizations do have that luxury in the way that a lot don't. And I think that is, you know, to kind of Mark's point, it's obviously, that's one of the great things about the likes of the BFI. But to be honest, all three of your organizations, is the work that you do, how that can be reused elsewhere. And that's something that we're really keen to encourage and champion as well, is that, you know, there can be lots of amazing work done to check whether rights are available, what prints are available, what's available DCP wise, even marketing campaigns that are put together as well. How can that then be used for those smaller theatres that, you know, just don't have the resource to put something like that together, and therefore in turn, as a consequence, are never going to really encourage an audience for repertory. And I think, you know, what is proven through a lot of organizations that do focus on it is that audience is very much there, despite streaming platforms cropping up left, right, and center. It's just actually the resource that the organizations have or don't have to actually introduce it. And I think more and more probably audiences do want a more diverse, richer presentation in programming and hearing from different voices. And again, that's what's really great about the way all these different programs have been described up to 1971. Is
Jack,
even if
could
these
I jump in?
Oh, sorry, Julie. Yeah.
You're just talking about marketing, and that is really key for us. And one of the real thorny issues for us at the moment are the studios not wanting you to cut new trailers or kind of make new artwork. And, you know, to find those new audiences, I think this is a really important aspect. And we're just, it seems to be getting worse in a way. A few years ago, I don't know if you remember, we cut a new trailer for Clockwork Orange, and were kind of trusted with the new trailer. But just recently, things seem to be clamping down again. And we just can't get the permission to kind of make new trailers, new posters. And it's really disappointing. I don't know.
It is definitely a challenge. I think what was really encouraging for us actually was this 1971 season, in the fact that it has titles from Warner Brothers, Universal and Sony. And, you know, for us, we're wanting to increasingly look at how we can present you know, curated packages or things that could be other titles to frame around a re-release and present them in the way that, you know, catalog distributors can only really do. And we were actually quite tentative around the idea of, are we going to be able to get sign off on a trailer that includes multiple films from different studios, even multiple films within a studio? All of a sudden you might have one film that just has, you know, legal clauses attached to it that mean you can only do so much with it. It can be very difficult, but again, I think it's really the time.
It took a while, Jack, didn't it?
It took a while, and I think again it goes back to time. And I think, you know, the time doesn't just help with the rights and the formats and getting the screenings done, because as you say, Julie, they absolutely need more than that. They do need marketing. Press is really important, that you were mentioning as well too. So I think it's sometimes making the case, which we want to do as best as we can. And, you know, sometimes there are just barriers that you come up against, but that's just part of the research, I suppose. I mean, you know, it can be case by case, but I think it's there are kind of, there are barriers that can be pushed through. Sometimes it's just the time and showing and proving that there's a case to be made for it as well. Some of this may well be easier said than done, of course, as you well know, but I do think that that's important to say.
Well, thank you for that question there, Julie. And Mark and Jack, thank you for telling us more about 1971 season. Before we cut, sorry, Mark.
Sorry, Anna.
Yes.
I'm just going to say, I'm just going to add that, you know, as the curator of the season, you know, I did have a longer list, and then I kind of cut it right down, out of space, but also focus for what I wanted the films to be about. But there was a film that's absent, which is Melvin Van Peebles' Sweetback's by That Song, which was released in 71, but you know, whether it was kind of came through a studio is a different matter altogether. But it did launch in a way blaxploitation, along with Shaft, which was also released in 71. Now I didn't show Shaft because my position is that it's a kind of genre film, whereas the films that I wanted to show were kind of defiantly independent. And so I kind of wanted to kind of generate a debate, but I'm very aware that Sweetback's by That Song should have been in there, but it wasn't available theatrically. So when you're checking through, so you might have an idea of the program in your head as a kind of ideal, but we, you know, when it comes to theatrical rights, you have to really understand what's going on there, but also then how that's reflected in the program. And, you know, kind of absence of the Black stories that were in Hollywood at that time is really important to acknowledge that it's absent. But I was very fortunate in that we got offered Melvin Van Peebles' story of the 3-day pass, which allowed me to then incorporate that narrative and that absence within the program. So I just think, you know, that reality check of availability is really, really important in terms of the rationalization of the curatorial sort of context.
One of the things that I would add to that, because I know that Julie will face this all the time, every venue will face that kind of issue. What we do, and I think my colleague Jason is just putting it in the chat, but what we do at home is, if we have researched a set of films, and there's some that would be really crucial to the story of that particular season, but we can't get them, then we communicate that to audiences and to make sure that people are part of that, because we know there's a huge appetite for and a huge knowledge base around rep and classic films for our audiences. So we often get asked, why didn't you do this, or that's missing? So to anticipate that, we would fill in the blanks.
That's such a good idea.
I got asked, so where's the French Connection? You know, 1971 French Connection. And it's that kind of, when I was developing the season, I was asked that quite a lot, actually. Well, you've got to show the French Connection. And it's like, well, no, I don't, actually, because the argument is that these are independent films, whereas that one's a genre reinvention. It's not an independent. So it focuses as I say, it focuses the curatorial mind on why this and why not that, which, you know, again, speaking to Rachel's point, I think is also, I mean, I've written an article about the whole season, which hopefully provides that sort of wider context for audiences. But it's kind of two things. It is that thing about why you're not showing what you wanted to show, Sweetback, and why you're showing what you're showing and not showing, in this case, the French Connection, for example.
And I think if you can explain that to your audiences, they actually really appreciate it. So yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah, it's what in journalism we call the what about us. What about this? What about that? But yeah, to just be really explicit with people and say, well, this is our process and this is why we didn't do this and this is why we did do that. Great. Well, that's fascinating stuff. We've got to move on to the audience Q&A in a second. But to wrap up before that, I would love everyone to give me their top line, kind of one line of advice on, kind of how to shape these rep seasons. So Rachel, for you first, what's your best advice?
I would say to trust the audience to be interested in the things that you're going to show. And I'll use that as at the moment just to say that we're getting the most success right now with archive titles, with our One Car Y season. And we would have probably thought that would be the case, but the success of them is phenomenal. So our audiences in Manchester are doing us proud in terms of coming out to see Rep. So I trust the audiences.
Trust the audience. That's a great one. Thank you. Julie.
I was going to say exactly the same, actually. Don't be scared. I mean, we're just finishing up on One Car Y now, and we could have sold those films many times over. And it's really heartening. In terms of our wider programme, it is the archive titles that are bringing in the audiences at the moment and not the new releases, which I find really heartening.
That's great. That's lovely to hear. Mark?
Well, I mean, rights, theatrical rights research, absolutely vital. And then also just research, the research around the subject matter, if people can see that. I went back to this, which I was, gotten years ago and have kind of read from an academic point of view, but then found myself going back to it because of the 1971 season. And again, that sort of, why you're doing what you're doing and communicating that to the audience. And I think, as we've all said, we've all got audiences that really they want to know more. They're a cine literate audience that want to engage in the meaning of things. And I think, you're dealing with a dialogue and a conversation with the audience.
Thank you. Jack, anything to add before we move on to the Q&A?
Yeah, I would probably say, I thought this was a good point that Simon Duffy from the BFI made when he did a webinar with the ICO about, rights checking and programming archive films. I think expand your network. I think it can feel very difficult to program repertory on your own. And again, as I say, probably the best place to start is not just with a standalone re-release, is how do you want to actually factor repertory into your program and think about it creatively, because your world is, there's so much there's so many directions you can go in that might be specific to your location. Rachel talking about the Granada focus there that might really only work, for example, in certain parts of the country rather than a big nationwide program that the BFI might lead on. But I think expand your network, speak to other venues, speak to venues that are maybe more established. They might have more rights connections that you might have yourself. You might also be able to share in programs as well. And then when in turn you're coming to a distributor, one of the key ways that we were able to get behind the 1971 season with Cinema Rediscovered, or some things that we'll do with the BFI, is that we know that there's going to be other venues that are coming along with it. So we in turn could look at how can we make a trailer available for this, create season artwork, look at marketing and PR angles as well. And then all of a sudden, we are just able to help you that bit more rather than just literally clearing the rights. So expand your network to get you some more information, but to help get your programs off the ground.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now, we've had some questions in. Thank you all very much for that. Our first one. Let's say there is a film that you're really keen to bring to your rep film season, but no UK distributor currently holds the theatrical rights. Can anything be done to bring it to the screen? Who wants to take that one? Jack, maybe?
Well, sure. Oh, so on you go, Mark.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to say, I wanted, it was actually, it was a season that I was doing, I can't remember what the context was now, but I wanted to screen Onibaba, the Japanese film from the late 50s, early 60s. And I could buy it at that time. FOP existed, and I could buy the DVD in FOP, but I could not screen it in the cinema. We tracked it down to Toho, and they wanted a couple of grand or something, and they wanted it only screened off the DCP, and they wanted it, it just became impossible to do as a one-off screening. So I had this DVD in it's got it upstairs. I've got this DVD of Oni Baba, but I couldn't screen it in the cinema because the rights were reverted back to the rights holder, and that was that. So you've always got to do the research on who the rights holders are, and then talk to them.
Yeah, we've been going round in circles. We're doing the Robert Altman retrospective at the moment, and we nearly lost Shortcuts and The Player. And we've literally been bounced from pillar to post about who owns the rights. Simon, actually, just to mention him again, we've managed to sort it out just a couple of weeks before the first screenings. But yeah, it's a complicated process. We are film detectives.
Film detectives, I love that. So thank you for that. The next question says, could each panelist tell us their favourite rep season that they've been to anywhere in the world or that they've programmed, and why? Great. Who wants to chime in with that one?
I could start with that. Oh, sorry, Rachel. You go.
Go for it, Rachel. Yeah. Then we'll come to Jack. Yeah.
Mine is my first experience of the festival in Bologna and being outside in the square and seeing live music in the square and family experiences, and how this is going back a long time now. And thinking about archive work differently, and it had a real impact of who might be interested in seeing this kind of work. It had a real impact on my personal outlook on that. It was really good. Thank you. Jack?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of examples that I'd like to say, but one just personally was really great for me and was just a surprise as well, was at the American Cinematheque in Los Angeles and seeing a double bill of Shape of Water and The Creature from the Black Lagoon with Guillermo del Toro showing up to do a Q&A in between the screenings. That was it was just great, and it just felt like it was such a good way to approach repertory as well, in the kind of crossover programming you can do. So that was just a really memorable experience for me. But I think one of the, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before in these webinars, but one of the most successful and biggest scale programs that we do is with the CNC in France, the national film body in France, who do a nationwide school screening program. And it's in partnership, obviously, with the government funding that they'll receive, but they have regional organizations across the country that effectively coordinate with the CNC and schools to put on film programs where basically they're presented with an array of different films that they can play. We have films like Gattaca to, let's see, It Happened One Night, even Psycho is in there, where effectively teachers and schools can think, we would like to base a class on one of these films, and then the class go to the cinema to see that film for a really low ticket price, and then they go back to their classrooms to talk about the film. They're given a booklet to go through what's interesting about it from a film point of view, but then also, broader themes, things to talk about that you could link into just discussions about society or whatever it might be, or science, just depending on the subject matter. And it's just absolutely incredible. And I feel like it's if that film education template could be mirrored in every other country around the world, then we would all be far more film literate, but it would just really encourage young people to go and see films. And I think it's just a really fantastic initiative that has got the government support behind it, absolutely. But it brings a lot of satisfaction when you see, hundreds, thousands of people seeing a wide variety of classic films, and how they then really kind of get their teeth stuck into it as well and talk about it. So it's just a really rewarding thing that we actually do, that I think is something that would be really good to discuss, how we could try and look at that in other places. I think the UK included. I mean, the idea of going to see It Happened One Night at 12 years old or whatever it would be, and then going back to your classroom to talk about it afterwards would just be amazing. I absolutely did not do that. I had to rely on my own kind of interest, not until I was quite a bit older, to start going to the cinema and thinking about that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's a really great thing that we also do.
Oh, that's heartwarming and inspiring. This is a great question. So it's going to make it our last question. And so I'm going to turn to Mark next to answer it. The favourite rep season you've been to anywhere in the world or that you've programmed?
Well, I mean, like Rachel, it's Bologna. I mean, I don't think we should underestimate the impact that Bologna, Il Cinema Ritrovato has had on world programmers and cinemas. And so for me, the African films that they've been doing and restoring and with the World Film Foundation, actually, so seeing the Sembène, Ousmane Sembène films and Membeti, new restorations of Black Girl and Tukibuki, for example, and that sort of ongoing work that they've been doing, and then we've managed to screen some of them at Cinema Rediscovered with the relationship. So just seeing again those older films, but actually made new again, and then been able to sort of both see them in that context, but also been able to show them to audiences in the cinema.
Wonderful, thank you. Julie?
Yeah, just a couple of things quickly. One of the first retrospectives I worked on was Gordon Parks. And what I really love when you do retrospective is if you can break it out of the cinema. So hand in hand with the retrospective, there was an exhibition at the Photographer's Gallery, and he was just a superb photographer as well. So I like it when you can just expand things. And another program that I loved was when we had Kelly Reichardt over, and we did a weekend. I love it when you have a living, breathing filmmaker, and she just gave herself over for the weekend. And Jack, we saved certain women from obscurity. I think it was just going to go straight to Blu-ray. Anyway, she came for the weekend and she introduced, all of her films, did Q&As, and you just get really kind of involved. Yeah, I like that kind of programming.
Fantastic. I love all the enthusiasm in this virtual room for the programming and for rep. And thank you everyone for watching and for your great questions. I hope you found it useful. Massive thank you to the panelists. I've learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else has. Thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to next time. And to those watching, do check the Cinema Rediscovered website for another great event later today. So Restored and Rediscovered slate presentation will be at 2:30 today. And you'll once more hear from Jack and other distributors for some more inspirational programming ideas. I've been Anna Smith. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.